Anti-government protests erupt in Israel. Calls for ceasefire and hostage return intensify. Welcome to ARM News. Thousands of protesters gathered across Israel last night, voicing their anger and frustration with the government's handling of the ongoing conflict. The demonstrations, held in major cities like Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Jerusalem, have gained momentum, with participants demanding an immediate ceasefire and an urgent deal to secure the return of hostages held by militant groups. The protests, organized by civil society groups, families of hostages, and anti-government activists, come amid growing public dissatisfaction with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's administration. Protesters accuse the government of failing to prioritize the safe return of Israeli citizens and allowing the prolonged conflict to wreak havoc on the nation. Families of hostages lead the charge. Central to the protests were the families of hostages, who carried photographs of their loved ones and pleaded for government action. "My son has been in captivity for months. Every day without action is a day we lose hope," said Miriam Katz, the mother of a 25-year-old soldier abducted during a recent attack. The families demanded transparency and updates on negotiations with Hamas and other groups holding Israeli captives. "The government owes us answers and solutions, not political rhetoric," one protester shouted. Growing calls for a ceasefire. Protesters also criticized the ongoing military operations in Gaza, which have led to a significant loss of life on both sides. "Enough is enough. This endless cycle of violence must stop. A ceasefire is the only way to prevent further bloodshed," said Avi Cohen, a protester in Tel Aviv. Demonstrators carried signs reading, "Bring them home," "Stop the war," and "Negotiation, not escalation." Many chanted slogans accusing the government of prioritizing military objectives over humanitarian concerns. Government response. The Netanyahu administration has remained firm on its stance, stating that military operations are essential for ensuring Israel's long-term security. In a statement, the government said, "We are committed to the safe return of hostages and will continue working with international partners to achieve this goal. However, any ceasefire must guarantee the safety of Israeli citizens." Despite the government's assurances, opposition leaders have joined the protesters in condemning the administration's approach. "This government has lost its moral compass. We need leadership that prioritizes life and peace," said opposition leader Yair Lapid. International attention. The protests have drawn significant international attention, with human rights organizations calling on both sides to agree to a ceasefire and prioritize negotiations for hostages. The United Nations has also urged de-escalation, warning of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. A nation at a crossroads as tensions rise. The protests highlight a nation deeply divided. While some Israelis support the government's hardline stance, many are demanding a shift toward diplomacy and compromise. The question remains, will the government heed the calls of its people, or will the conflict continue to escalate? For now, the streets of Israel are filled with voices crying out for peace, justice, and the safe return of their loved ones. ARM News will continue to follow this developing story and provide updates as they emerge.